Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today and we are reviewing the reviews of Doom Eternal. Something a little bit different than what we normally do. I did not receive a review copy, but I was very interested in how Doom Eternal would turn out. It seemed like there was a lot of hype behind it, and it's received, as we can see right now, overwhelming scores. We're looking at a review roundup from Video Games 24/7, where it says there's cathartic combat, passable platforming, and stupid swimming. That gives it a 4 out of 5 on Video Game 24/7. IGN gives it a 9, VGC gives it a 4 out of 5, PC Gamer gives it a 94 out of 100, Video Gamer an 8, GamesRadar 3.5 out of 5, Steviver 9, EGM 4 out of 5, Press Start 10, GameStop 8 but in progress, Eurogamer, US Gamer, both have no score or in progress reviews. Jouactu gave it an 18 out of 20, and Spazio Games gave it a 9.1. Now, you can look at these scores on the surface and be like, Doom Eternal seems pretty good, but I want to dive into some individual reviews, previews, and some information we got in the past that doesn't seem to line up with a couple of reviews, and analyze that so you guys can get a proper picture on what is going into this game, what you can truly expect. For some of you who have been around for about a year and a half now, you'll remember I did this with Fallout 76, and I had a good time doing it. So let's get started with the PC Gamer review. Doom Eternal also runs beautifully on a wide range of hardware and feels designed for a mouse and keyboard. It's a modern classic with a few caveats. Cheap deaths from getting stuck on geometry happen too often. There are 6 or 7 layers of unnecessary progression. Doom's dark humor has been mostly traded in for deep lore and high fantasy cosmology, and the strain from a heavy focus on resource management is felt at every difficulty level. I worry for some it could be Doom too much, but too much works for me as Eternal's guiding light. The moment-to-moment combat is distilled panic rather than empowerment. I live for the fleeting moments my head gets above water within the hurricane of light and noise and extravagant violence, and I pull off a feat of accuracy and reflex I never thought I was capable of before. So one commonality amongst these reviews is that Doom Eternal's really intense and there's a lot of resource management. What I wanted to focus on is number 1 in this section here. PC Gamer highlights that it runs very well on PC as expected, but it feels like it's built for the mouse and keyboard, so if you have the options, play it there. More importantly, we also want to focus on the geometry, the level design. This is something that does not seem to have done all that well across a general amount of the reviews. Also, there's a focus on lore that was already in Doom 2016. I mean, they had a really in-depth codex. For those who did not take a time to read that, I would recommend it because they did build a universe there. So I'm not too surprised that they're building on deep lore. I never really thought of Doom for dark humor, but that's just me. What I like most about this review, and what I think is important for everyone to remember with every review, is that this one considers, hey, this is for me, it may not be for you. A lot of reviewers look through a lens and go, this works for me and here's why it works for me. They don't think of people who may not like certain aspects that they like. So I think it's good that this review considers that. So platforming has been added to Doom Eternal, and I don't think it's turned out as it had hoped. First-person platforming just about works for Doom when it is an optional extravagance, when you're off exploring for the myriad of optional collectibles scattered throughout each of the missions. But as a prerequisite to progression, they only serve to introduce points of friction in an otherwise frictionless experience. Very well written there. By the time underwater sections were introduced, dear God, there are underwater sections, slowing you down even further with the added annoyance of mitigating radioactive damage thrown in for good measure, it starts to become difficult to resist the urge to put the controller down and walk away entirely. That all said, it's difficult to indulge in these tendencies when you're faced with the prospect of coming across another sensationally realized vista or the opportunity to shove the super shotgun double barrel deep into the throat of a Baron of Hell. That's where Doom Eternal feels right, reveling in ultra violence across some impossibly beautiful environments. The game has built on the core loop that helped propel its predecessor from mere revival project to genuine revolution, its central gimmick always working to keep the player moving and critically engaging with enemies. So, platforming, we'll see not a lot of people really like that. Furthermore, underwater sections, that is a negative for a good couple of reviews, and I just, in the terms of design, I'll have to play it and see how it really pans out. Maybe it's a good change of pace and that's what they were going for, and it could feel like that, but from the outside looking in, it's almost like they tried to do too much there, right? Because you think of how the identity of Doom has now become move, survive, shoot 'em up. And when you put someone underwater, essentially that slows it down. And unless it's like Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which I played recently, that game didn't slow down when you were underwater. But when it comes to Doom Eternal, I wouldn't have put a water level in there. All right, let's take a look at IGN. First off, I wanted to read this top portion here because this applies to all reviews. Heads up, this review is exclusively focused on Doom Eternal's single-player campaign. The multiplayer mode, battle mode, won't be available until launch on March 20th, so we're going to review it separately and then issue our final Doom Eternal score as soon as possible after that. So yeah, none of these reviews factor in for the battle mode that was supposed to launch with Doom Eternal. They're just reviewing the single player portion. As we can see here, Game Informer, where's our Doom Eternal review? They don't have it up yet because none of the critics have been able to play battle mode yet. I respect this take of just waiting to see the full package because multiplayer is probably what I would say you're going to be dabbling in with mostly after Doom Eternal is done in the campaign section. That's just me personally. That's what happened to me with Doom 2016. I didn't feel enticed to go back and continue replaying the single player campaign, but I could be wrong on that aspect. Anyway, I wanted to read the first paragraph here of the IGN review. I knew Doom Eternal had proven its point when I started taking down Marauders without breaking a sweat, really. These terrifying devil-horned axe wielders had been life-threatening challenges when they were first introduced midway through the game, but a while later I delighted in turning the tables on them thanks to some powerful and hard-earned upgrades. Doom Eternal not only retains the wild high speed to the brink of death and back again ebb and flow of combat that its 2016 predecessor excelled at, it tweaks the formula to introduce more strategy, replayability, and ultimately satisfaction to this 15-plus hour first-person shooter campaign. Okay, so 2 takeaways here. First, we take a look at the IGN review, some powerful and hard-earned upgrades. Mind you, we go back to the PC Gamer article. We remember here up at the top, we can find where they say there are 6 or 7 layers of unnecessary progression, right? So you're like, okay, what does that mean? You scroll down to this section. Also, on the pile of new stuff to digest, a lot of progression systems. Weapon points, runes, secrets, sentinel, batteries, suit upgrades, challenges, weapon mods, skins, weapon mod upgrades, weapon mastery upgrades. It's a lot, too much, really, because Eternal places the bulk of these upgrades along the critical path. By the end, I had almost every upgrade, and without trying too hard to find them all, as if it's an elaborate cardboard front built to make the player feel good while ensuring that they stay at pace with this steep difficulty curve. Secrets give a little incentive to stop and dig out extra collectibles and upgrades, but they're clearly marked on the map, and Doom Eternal's level design is extremely straightforward. I miss the mazes of old FPS games or recent homages like Iron Maiden, where finding that last keycard or a hidden door was a big victory. So just keep in mind the difference of opinion. Mind you, Doom Eternal still got a 94 out of 100 from PC Gamer. And then IGN gave it a 9.5, but it seems IGN viewed that progression system in a more positive light, but based on the thorough explanation of what's here in PC Gamer, just once again, based off your taste, based off your experience. Number 2, I said I wanted to point something else out. Satisfaction to this 15-plus hour first-person shooter campaign. So one of the things I was really worried about with Doom Eternal when it came to this game was that I was seeing that it was going to be longer than the first one, and I was like, oh boy, because I felt like the first one already went on too long, and I feel like it shot its load early. It gave you all of your weapons, all of your tools very early on, so you had like 12 hours just to play around with the same thing. And so this is saying that's 15 hours. It took me 16 hours personally to beat Doom 2016 on my first run, so it differs for everyone, but that's one thing worth considering. Furthermore, when we go to this article here from GamesRadar, this was when there was a press event for Doom Eternal earlier this year, and they said Doom Eternal will be about twice as long as Doom 2016 according to id Software. Now, we can use howlongtobeat.com. I don't consider this the guru for everyone who can possibly beat the game in this allotted amount of time. What happens essentially is people will play the game, they'll come on here, and they'll just submit how many hours it took, and so it kind of averages that out essentially. But what it does is helps you ballpark. That's all I want to do here is ballpark. Now I said 16 hours, main and extra, 16 hours. So this lines up for me, right? And they're saying that main story, we'll just say the bare minimum, would be double that length. IGN took 15 hours, but yet double the length of Doom 2016 would put us at about 22 hours, 23 hours technically, actually. Maybe even 30 hours of main and extras. And I would believe the completionist, that's the thing, is you're going to see, and Carrick and I have talked about this on the podcast a lot, you're going to see companies overshoot or undershoot a lot of the times with their game length. Because if they undershoot in the, we'll say, press discussions, in the interviews, they say this game's going to be 30 hours, much like Greedfall, right? I remember specifically covering that game and how they were saying it's going to be around a 30-hour game. It took me 45 hours to beat, and I played a lot of Greedfall. So what happens is the consumer is like, wow, they actually put a ton of content in here. I didn't expect that, and it can lead to a good feeling. I don't know if it's intentional mixed messaging, but just know the length based off IGN's review is like woefully inaccurate to what information was being spread 2 months ago. So just keep that in mind. I think that's really important. Okay, back to some more positive stuff. The 2016 game was a thrilling reimagining of the speed and ferocity of the 90s Doom combat, but it also magnified Doom's narrative trappings, adding in cutscenes, audio diaries, codex entries, and mid-mission dialogue. A curious reversal of one of id's key decisions with the original game, which was once planned to include a sizable narrative component written by co-founder Tom Hall. This is all by Eurogamer, mind you. Eternal adds yet more to the load, expanding the cast and redoubling its emphasis on lore. So, second time we've seen that so far. Cutscenes are now a mix of first and third person, which means the Slayer is a fully tangible human being, one you can moreover trick out with unlockable outfits and weapon skins rather than a pair of enormous fists twitching beneath your aiming reticle. He feels enclosed by the fiction rather than a Christian Donlin put it back in the day, like a man who is also playing Doom and who shares your resentment for anything that gets in the way. There's some effort to explain the character's superhuman prowess, with one scientist suggesting that you represent humanity's rage to survive, as opposed to humanity's love of making cacodemons pop in slow motion. The Slayer even has a voice these days, though I think he strings together maybe 5 words in total. That could be a big deal for people, right? It's kind of like that moment when we heard Let's Go Pal in the Fallout 4 trailer, and you're like, wait, he talks? Same thing here with the Doomslayer. Doomslayer never talks as far as I was aware. And to see that they string together even 5 words might be a big deal for folks, because it's like, why even do it in the first place? But yeah, I just wanted to emphasize in this part of reviewing the reviews that there is a clear narrative focus in Doom Eternal that they didn't try to go for in 2016. And this could also be to the detriment of the game, because while a lot of it seems like what I like to call flyby narrative, where you're on the go and it's audio diaries and people talking in your ear while you're going from point A to point B, that's not that bad. But when it stops the game between what we saw earlier with, water missions, platforming can get a little frustrating, then you've got cutscenes thrown in. I don't know. I could see this game struggling with pacing, and that's why I think when it comes to the consumer, you might see it a little all over the place. Some people are absolutely going to love this game. It's going to be everything they wanted and then some. And I think some people might be a little disappointed because it seems like the pacing isn't as continuously loved. Like, that was one thing you could go through every Doom 2016 review and be like, wow, okay, that is something that for sure is consistent amongst these reviews. But it seems like everyone's having their own takeaways, which is also a good thing about the game because it means it has a lot to offer. So the last one I wanted to take a look at was the review in progress from GameSpot. The mental math, I found this kind of funny. The mental math of figuring out how to keep yourself alive is a big part of what makes the game fun, but the improved mobility that lets Doom Eternal kick off a metal guitar solo and start shredding. So I just want to stop right there for a second. If you've noticed one thing as I've rolled through these reviews and I've read each of them individually, not many of them sit down and talk about the music, which I think is one of the most fundamental parts of Doom. Like, it kicks and roars and gets you going, and you're kind of like head nodding as the music picks up and you start slaying demons. That hasn't been a fundamental part of these reviews, and it's something that I want more reviews to focus on personally as just a consumer of media in general. I think that sound deserves its own section. That's why I do it. That's why Carrick does it, for example. Sound elevates so many parts of the gameplay, but it's so underlying that I think it gets overlooked. Fortunately, this review does mention it in the same breath of action and combat, which is exactly where I think it's standing out. But there hasn't been that many dedicated sections to just talking about how good the soundtrack is, which I found a little surprising because that's what everyone was really excited about with Doom 2016. Anyway, let's continue reading. Every big battle takes place in a multi-level arena adorned with jump pads and monkey bars that let you get around quickly. I also wonder with this, we're going to pause for a second, monkey bars, jump pads, if you just got a bunch of monkey bars like hanging around in hell, I'm just gonna be like, why are these here in the first place? So hopefully they're built into the level in a natural way. We'll say a la Uncharted. I'm not a big Uncharted fan, but I do like the way they design their levels where when you scale the environment, it feels very natural, if you will. And you also have a double jump and horizontal dash move for avoiding attacks and crossing distances. A few arenas have their irritations, especially those where it's easy to trap yourself in a tight corner or back off a cliff, but mostly Eternal's level design provides plenty of opportunities to zip around like a bat out of hell, constantly finding your next target and assessing if you need to set it on fire, freeze it, cut it in half, tear it apart, or some combination of all of them. It all makes just about every fight feel like a speeding train seconds from going off the rails, with disaster only averted because you're so goddamn good at killing stuff. Once you get the rhythm of Doom Eternal, it becomes a brilliant extension of what made Doom 2016 so cool. Between your battles, you'll spend your time using Doom Eternal's mobility to navigate its sprawling, twisting levels and to uncover myriad secret locations that hide upgrades and weapon mods. There's an even bigger emphasis on platforming than in Doom 2016, so we're seeing that once again. We know that platforming is going to be a big part of this game, and puzzling through the environment to get around provides a welcome breather between fights. So this reminds me exactly of what I was saying with Rage 2. I liked after Rage 2, there was a moment of respite going from point A to point B. People didn't attack me, didn't harass me, didn't interrupt me. And I liked that because the combat was so boom, 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 like in your face. I was like, okay, I do want a breather now. And I felt the game paced out very well that way, which is why it landed in my top 5 games of the year last year. And now a lot of people, once again, it's all about pacing here. A lot of people want the action to keep going. And I remember having a discussion about Doom 2016 with a couple of fans, and they were just like, yeah, we loved how Doom just kept going and it didn't stop. And for me, I was like, I wanted it to stop for just 5 seconds so I could just catch my breath, because eventually my brain just goes numb and I'm like, click, shoot, jump, click, shoot. And it's just like, you're on autopilot at that point. And I don't think that's personally engaging. So for me, I may end up liking puzzling through the environments because, as GameSpot noted for their experience, it provides a welcome breather. Continuing on, some of the platforming can be a bit trying at times, especially when you need to clear big gaps to grab distant monkey bars or hit sticky walls you can climb. For the most part, though, navigating the environment is almost as fun as smashing through Hell's Army. These portions are also pretty forgiving, thanks to the fact that falling into the abyss now only penalizes you with a small loss of health instead of instant death. Seems like a pretty self-aware design decision. But that is reviewing the reviews of Doom Eternal. Overall, things look good, but I just wanted to make sure, and try new pieces of content here, mind you, but I wanted to make sure when you look at these numbers, it could be overwhelming in the sense of like, oh yeah, 10, 9, 94, 4.5, or I'm sorry, 4.5, or 4, can I read? 4 out of 5, 9, 4 out of 5. You're like, yep, no shot that I'm missing this one. I'm getting it right away. But when you read a little deeper, some of these issues line up. I think platforming is a common issue. I think progression can be hit or miss. I think pacing can be hit or miss. I think the storytelling may be a little more in your face than some people may like. So just keep this in mind when making your purchasing decision. If you guys like these reviewing the reviews, I'll be sure to do them when I don't get my own review copy, because as a consumer, I'm like, okay, if I'm not going to get my own copy and develop my own opinion, I'm going to try to see what everyone else thinks of the game and see if it stacks up to that when I put my hands on it, and then I'll provide my review afterwards. So if you guys like this as supplemental review content, I will gladly keep doing this if you find it useful instead of parsing through the reviews yourself. And I leave you guys with all that. So let me know what you think of Doom Eternal in the comments down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. Big thank you to all the patrons who continue to support what I do here. And I'll talk with you guys soon. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.